Today we're doing a deep dive into what I can really only describe as an economic puzzle.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating one.
It is because, okay, if you look at July 2026, China reported an official urban unemployment rate of just 5.2%,
Right.
which, 5.2%, that sounds completely normal by all conventional metrics. That's a perfectly healthy economy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then if you dig into the source material we're looking at today, there's this obscure, almost forgotten metric buried way down in the data. And it shows that at the end of 2025, 12.7 million people registered as unemployed.
Yeah.
And that is a massive 16% spike in just a single year.
Yeah, it's a huge jump.
So that's our mission today, really, to figure out how one number can look perfectly fine, just totally normal, while another one is basically flashing red. I mean, intuitively, if the main unemployment rate is that low, why is everyone saying the job market there is weak?
Well, the most alarming thing about that 5.2% unemployment rate isn't that it's too high. It draws that economists look at it and see that it's strangely, almost unnaturally stable.
Unnaturally stable? What do you mean by that?
So let's look at the timeline, right?
Great.
China introduced this specific metric, this modern survey-based measure for urban unemployment back in 2018.
Okay, 2018.
Yeah. And out of the 115 months since they introduced it, the rate has sat between 5% and 6% for 99 of those months.
Wait, 99 out of 115 months?
Yes.
That's years. That covers a lot of ground. We're talking about a global pandemic in there.
Exactly.
A massive property market crisis, all these major shifts in global trade, the rise of AI.
Yeah, a tremendous amount of structural change. And even during the absolute peak of the COVID-19 shock, in 2020.
Right, when unemployment in places like the U.S. was shooting up into double digits.
Right, exactly. Even then, China's surveyed urban unemployment rate only hit 6.2%.
Only 6.2%, wow.
Yeah, so economists like to use this analogy. Imagine you have a thermometer outside your window, and it reads 21 degrees Celsius during a summer heat wave.
Sounds nice.
Right, but then it also reads 21 degrees during a winter blizzard.
Oh, I see.
You wouldn't immediately say, oh, the thermometer is totally broken.
Yeah.
But you would definitely start to question what it's actually measuring.
Yeah, you start wondering if it's measuring the weather outside or just the temperature inside the glass.
Exactly.
But I mean, we are talking about an economy of 1.4 billion people, and it goes through massive changes. When a factory closes or a big construction project halts, that economic pain has to go somewhere, right? How can the rate stay so perfectly flat?
Well, the pain actually moves geographically.
Geographically.
Yeah. And this brings us to the first major mechanism that's at play here. It acts like a structural pressure valve.
Okay.
We have to remember the exact boundary of what this 5.2% statistic is actually measuring. It only counts urban unemployment.
So just the cities.
Just the cities. But China has hundreds of millions of migrant workers.
Right, the traditional engine of the whole economic boom over there.
Exactly. People who move constantly between rural villages and urban centers.
Millions leaving the countryside to work in factories or, on construction sites in places like Shenzhen or Shanghai.
Right. And when the urban economy is strong, new arrivals fill the jobs and the unemployment rate stays stable.
Makes sense.
But when those city jobs dry up, like we're seeing in some sectors now, a lot of those unemployed migrant workers don't just hang around in the city looking for work.
Because it's expensive to live there, I imagine.
Exactly. They pack up, they stop looking for urban employment, and they return to their hum villages in the rural areas.
Oh, wait. So because they physically leave the city, they leave the urban labor pool, they just literally disappear from the urban unemployment statistic.
That is exactly what happens.
Wow. But I mean, their personal financial stress doesn't disappear.
No, not at all.
They still don't have an income. But the city's data suddenly looks better because they left.
Right. The economic pressure isn't eliminated. It just acts like a pressure valve, releasing the steam out of the city and shifting it completely beyond the statistical boundary.
So the pain moves out of sight.
Yes. And the urban thermometer stays at a comfortable 21 degrees.
Okay, I get that. But still, even with that geographic pressure valve, 99 out of 115 months being that stable, it's just incredible.
It is.
It makes you wonder, the elephant in the room here, are the data just fake? Are they just making the 5.2% up to look good?
Well, this is a really important point. Economists caution strongly against just calling the numbers fake.
Okay.
There's no proof of falsification or anything like that. The real issue was actually a deeply structural problem with incentives.
Incentives.
Yeah, and it's perfectly explained by a concept in economics called Goodhart-Orr.
Goodhart's law. What is that?
So Goodhart's law basically states that when a measure becomes a target, it stops being a good measure.
When a measure becomes a target, it stops being a good measure. Can you give me an example?
Sure, let's use a school. Normally, a school uses a general math test to measure how well students are learning, right?
Right.
The test is simply a measure. But if the government suddenly tells the school, hey, your funding now depends entirely on hitting a 90% average on this one specific test.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. The measure has now become a target.
So the teachers will just stop teaching general math.
Exactly.
They'll just drill the students entirely on how to pass that exact test.
Yes. And the scores will look amazing.
But they no longer measure actual mathematical understanding.
Right. They just measure how well the school optimized for the test.
Okay, so how does that apply to China's unemployment numbers?
Well, the Chinese government doesn't just observe the surveyed urban unemployment rate. Since 2018, they've set an explicit policy target for it.
Ah, there it is.
Usually it's around 5.5%.
Okay.
Though, in 2020, during the height of the pandemic, they temporarily raised that target to 6%.
And the reported number peaked at 6.2%.
Exactly. Because it's an official policy target, local officials and the whole bureaucratic system, they're highly motivated to keep the number near that goal.
So they're teaching to the test.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
They might say subsidize a struggling factory to prevent layoffs for a few months.
Or actively encourage unemployed workers to return to the countryside faster.
Right. They manage the environment to reduce volatility.
Wow.
And economists suspect this creates what they call false comfort. The dial on the dashboard looks fine, but it's no longer giving us a raw, unfiltered picture of the economic engine.
Okay, so if the main number is compromised by Goodhart's law and just giving us false comfort, we need a different metric. We do. Which brings us back to that 16% spike from the beginning of our deep dive today.
Exactly. So economists have started looking at this old, almost obscure metric. It's called registered unemployment.
Registered unemployment?
Yeah, this measure has actually existed since 1978. And it only counts people who physically go to local authorities and officially register themselves as unemployed. Usually they do this to apply for some sort of benefit.
So it's much more active. But why is it considered more reliable now if it's so old?
Well, because the government focused all its attention on the modern 2018 survey, this older metric stopped being an official policy target.
No, nobody was trying to optimize the test anymore.
Exactly, which means it can actually become a useful signal again.
Because nobody's managing it.
Right. For years, nobody was paying much attention to it at all. But then, at the end of 2025, the raw number of registered unemployed people suddenly hit 12.7 million.
12.7 million.
Yes, that's a near 16% increase in a single year.
Wow.
So while the official survey rate stayed perfectly flat at around 5.2%, this forgotten metric jumped aggressively.
So is that 12.7 million? Is that the real unemployment number then?
Well, we do have to be careful not to treat 12.7 million as the absolute perfectly accurate number for the entire country.
Right, there's always a caveat.
There is an important caveat. In 2020, the government changed the rules to make it much easier for people to register as unemployed.
Oy.
Even if they're living far from their official hometown, they could now register. So a portion of the increase over the last few years is just a natural result of that rule change.
Making the paperwork easier means more people do the paperwork.
Exactly. So we can't just point to it and say it's the absolute truth.
However, a rule change in 2020 does not explain a sudden, sharp 16% jump between 2024 and 2025.
No, it doesn't. And that's why economists are watching it. That specific spike is a massive flashing warning signal. It shows real labor market stress that the smooth 5.2% number is just completely failing to capture.
Okay, so the stress is real. That brings up the next big question. Where is that stress actually coming from? Where are the jobs disappearing to?
So economists have some strong suspicions here. And again, we need to be clear that we are looking at economic suspicions based on data trends.
Right, not absolute proven facts yet.
Right. But they suspect that the historical engines of job creation in China are sputtering.
Okay.
The first major suspicion involves the relationship between exports and jobs.
Well, China's experiencing a massive export boom right now, aren't they?
They are.
And traditionally, a boom in exports means factories are hiring workers at a frantic pace to keep up with demand.
That's how it used to work. But economists suspect that link is weakening.
Why?
Well, factories are producing a massive volume of goods, sure, but they aren't necessarily scaling up their workforce to do it anymore.
Oh, because of automation.
Exactly. Advancements in automation, robotics, just overall operational efficiency. It means a factory can potentially double its output while keeping its headcount completely flat.
So the production goes up, the GDP looks great, but the job market doesn't feel it at all.
Right.
Huh. And that labor stress isn't just isolated to the factory floor either, is it?
No, not at all. It's hitting the white-collar sector incredibly hard, too.
And this is where artificial intelligence comes in.
Yes, specifically AI. Think about the millions of young people graduating from Chinese universities every single year.
Right.
They spend years surviving this intense, grueling pressure of the Gaokao, the National College Entrance Exam.
Which is notoriously difficult.
Incredibly difficult. And they do this with the expectation of landing a solid, entry-level office job. Things in basic research, administration, translation, or data processing.
The exact tasks that generative AI can now just do instantly?
Exactly. Companies are realizing they simply don't need to hire an army of junior staff to handle routine analytical or administrative work anymore.
Because the software can just do it faster and cheaper.
Right. So the bottleneck for new graduates is severe. The jobs they train for simply aren't there in the volume they used to be.
So the transition from university to the professional world is becoming this highly contested bottleneck.
Yes.
Wow, so you have factory workers returning to their rural villages because manufacturing isn't hiring. And you have university graduates unable to find office jobs because AI is handling the entry-level work. Neither of those groups has any money to spend.
And that leads to the next big problem. When hundreds of millions of people suddenly stop spending, consumer demand plummets.
Right.
Companies panic. They're forced to slash prices just to survive and clear out their inventory.
So suddenly, the entire economy isn't just dealing with a weak job market, it's spiraling into deflation.
Exactly. It's a vicious loop. Weak labor demand leads directly to weak wage growth.
Because if 100 people are desperate to take your job, you have absolutely zero bargaining power to ask for a raise.
None at all. Wages stagnate, households save every penny they can out of fear, demand drops even further, and prices fall again.
Wow. It really is a loop.
Yeah. And this highlights a major conceptual shift that economists are pushing for when we talk about all this.
Okay, what kind of shift?
We have to realize that the word unemployment is just far too simple for a modern economy.
Too simple.
Yeah, it implies this neat binary. You either have a job or you don't.
Right.
But the economic pain we're describing today doesn't fit into that simple box. Economists argue we must distinguish between 4 different things to really understand what's happening.
Okay, let's go through them. What's the first one?
The first is traditional unemployment.
So just simply having no job at all and actively looking for one.
Right. That is the classic definition the surveys try to capture.
Okay. What's the second factor?
We have to look beyond that to employment quality.
Quality. Oh, so like underemployment.
Exactly.
Huh.
Picture a university graduate with a mechanical engineering degree who ends up driving for a rideshare app or delivering food just to pay rent.
Right. They are technically employed according to that 5.2% survey.
Yes, but they are experiencing deep economic and psychological stress. The quality of the job is far below their skill level.
Okay, so that's 2. What's a third?
Even if someone manages to secure and keep a white-collar job, we have to look at the third factor, which is wage growth.
Because of the deflation loop we talked about.
Right. Your job title stays the same, you show up every day, but your pay is completely stagnant.
And as the cost of living creeps up, you are effectively getting poorer.
But the unemployment statistic says you are doing perfectly fine.
Because you technically have a job.
Exactly.
Man. So underemployment and stagnant wages cover the people still in the system. But there's a fourth metric, right?
Yes. The fourth metric has to capture the people who just walk away entirely.
Walk away.
Labor force participation.
People who just drop out.
Exactly. They stop looking for work in the cities, or they join movements like lying flat.
Lying flat. That's where they choose to opt out of the hyper-competitive, low-reward rat race entirely, right?
Right. And because they are no longer actively seeking formal employment, they aren't counted as unemployed by the official metrics.
So you have underemployment, stagnant wages, and dropping out of the labor force. 3 massive forms of economic pain, and not a single one of them makes that headline 5.2% number go up.
Not one. And to show you just how sensitive these underlying metrics are, we only need to look back at 2023.
What happened in 2023?
Well, youth unemployment figures started rising rapidly,
Okay.
and it became a highly sensitive political topic.
Oh, I remember this. The publication of that specific statistic was temporarily suspended entirely, wasn't it?
It was. They stopped releasing the youth unemployment data until they could change the methodology and the rules.
Specifically excluding active students, I think, before they brought it back.
Exactly. When the numbers started telling a story that was uncomfortable, it was just pulled off the dashboard.
Wow. It perfectly illustrates Goodhart law in real time.
It really does. And it shows why economists are so desperate to look beyond the headline numbers and find alternative signals.
Like that 16% jump in registered unemployment.
Exactly.
So if we pull back and look at the big picture here, there is just this massive disconnect between the macroeconomic headlines and the reality on the ground.
Absolutely.
We constantly hear about China's GDP growing and exports hitting new records.
Right. But then there is this hidden structural stress in the job market that isn't making the front page.
And that is really the core takeaway when analyzing all this data. You know, GDP tells you how much a country produces.
Right.
It tells you the total size of the factory output and the sheer volume of the exports. But jobs and wages, they tell you how much of that wealth actually reaches ordinary households.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. Because if GDP grows but employment and wages remain weak, the country might look richer on paper.
Right.
But ordinary people aren't feeling it in their daily lives at all.
Exactly. The fact that the 5.2% unemployment rate remains frozen like a thermometer, stubbornly stuck at 21 degrees.
While all these underlying pressures build in exports and AI and rural migration,
Yes, that is the real story we have to watch.
it really leaves you wondering, if the unemployment rate is no longer enough to understand China's labor market, what should economists and ordinary Chinese workers watch instead?
It's the big question. And honestly, zooming out even further, if an economy of 1.4 billion people has figured out how to make their economic pain statistically invisible,
Right.
how many other global economic metrics, metrics that our own governments use to set interest rates and pass laws are just thermometers stuck at 21 degrees?